Welcome to Land of the Bible. I'm David Sussman. Today, we're stepping into the heart of ancient Jerusalem to uncover the layered and powerful story of the Jewish quarter. For thousands of years, Jews have lived, worshipped, and rebuilt in this corner of the Old City. Today, we will walk through time from the early days before and during the First Temple period through the grandeur of the Second Temple era and the devastation of 70 CE when the Romans destroyed the temple, the exile that would follow, and the eventual return of Jewish life. The tragedies of 1948, when the Jordanians ethnically cleansed the entire Old City of its Jewish residents, and the remarkable renewal of Jewish life in the Old City after the Six-Day War. We will visit the Broad Wall built by King Hezekiah over 2,700 years ago, explore the Southern Wall excavations of the Temple Mount, and trace Jewish life through the corridor and back alleys of the Old City Jewish quarter. We'll also stand at the Horva Synagogue, a symbol of both destruction and rebirth. This will be a journey not only through history, but through resilience. Join me as we explore how the Jewish quarter continues to reflect the unbreakable bond between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. Jerusalem, a city revered, disputed, and holy, not just to thousands or millions, but billions of people around the world. But before its sacred stones, domes, and pilgrims, there was dust, rock, and ambition. Long before Jerusalem was a spiritual center, it was a small hilltop community. In fact, archaeological evidence shows that the earliest settlement here dates back 5,000 years ago to the early Bronze period. That all changed with David, a shepherd, a warrior, a poet, a king. Around 1000 BCE, David would unify all the tribes of Israel. But he needed a capital, a place that belonged to no single tribe, that could serve both a political as well as a spiritual center for his new kingdom. Jerusalem at this time was controlled by the Jebusites, a Canaanite people. And it says in the book of Samuel that David's men will sneak through a small hidden water shaft, breaching the Jebusite city, and the Jebusites who once mocked David would be defeated. And David would establish Jerusalem as the capital of the nation of Israel. And under his rule, Jerusalem would become the central political heartbeat of the Jewish people. David would go on to build himself a palace here in Jerusalem and establish a centralized government. But maybe his greatest act was bringing the Ark of the Covenant here, changing Jerusalem from a mere city to a symbol, a place for God to dwell amongst his people. And David dreamed that one day he would be able to build a temple for God, but it would be his son Solomon who would carry that torch. Solomon's temple would stand as one of the most revered structures in ancient history. But it was David who gave the city its soul. From a hilltop stronghold to a holy city, its journey began in conquest and vision. And at its heart was the poet King David, who saw in stone and soil the promise of something eternal. Jerusalem today is still a city of stone and ancient dreams that lives in the heart and soul of the Jewish people who have returned here after 2,000 years of exile and liberated their ancestral homeland from colonial foreign powers who ruled here for the last 2 millennia. However, 2,700 years ago, it was a city on edge, rapidly expanding and preparing for war. These were the days of King Hezekiah. The year was 722 BCE, and the Assyrian Empire had already waged war on the northern 10 tribes of Israel, scattering them through the lands. And this is where we get the notion of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. However, those in the north that could see the writing on the wall came here to Jerusalem seeking refuge. The population increased tremendously, and these new neighborhoods were vulnerable, defenseless. Hezekiah realized that it was only a matter of time until the Assyrians arrived here to Jerusalem, and he needed to defend all the people. So he built a wall so thick it still stands today in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, known as the Broad Wall. "7 meters thick, this massive wall was part of a greater construction plan of Hezekiah's to defend the city from the Assyrian Empire and specifically its emperor Sennacherib. The wall's construction was swift and costly. Homes were demolished to make way for it. Stones were stacked with urgency. Every hand was needed. Every hour mattered. Hezekiah didn't stop at the Broad Wall. He also secured Jerusalem's water supply by rerouting the Gihon Spring through a hidden tunnel inside the city, a feat commemorated in an ancient Hebrew inscription. King Hezekiah built walls, dug tunnels, stopped springs. Jerusalem had become a fortress ready for the storm, and the prophet Isaiah not only recorded the events, but also gave a spiritual warning. It's quoted, "You counted the houses of Jerusalem, and you broke down the houses to fortify the wall. You made a reservoir between the 2 walls for the water of the old pool. But you did not look to him, to God who made it, or considered him, God, who planned it long ago." Miraculously, Jerusalem was spared. The Assyrian siege had ended. The enemy withdrew, and Isaiah's prophecy came to pass. Today, here in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, fragments of the old city's wall still stands as a testament of stone, courage, and faith.
Imagine walking where Jesus walked, where faith comes to life. Feel the Bible story unfold around you, from the green Galilee to Jerusalem's ancient streets. Experience the serene and welcoming land of the Bible, where miracles happen. Put your heart where His footsteps are. Visit Israel.
Solomon's temple, built in the 10th century BCE, was the spiritual crown of ancient Israel. That's until the Babylonians came. In 586 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon will conquer Jerusalem. He'll burn the city down, destroy the temple, and exile its people. Jerusalem wept, and the prophets mourned. And in Babylon, a question echoed: had God forsaken his people? Well, the prophets answered authoritatively, no, he hadn't. And his promise to the Jewish people that they'll return to the land of Israel would be delivered through an unlikely candidate, that of Cyrus of Persia. In the year 586 BCE, the king of Persia, Cyrus, will put out a decree that the exiled Jewish people could return to their homeland and rebuild their temple right here in Jerusalem. Pilgrims returned, offering sacrifices to God. It will be completed in the year 516 BCE, exactly 70 years after Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. However, it wouldn't be until the days of King Herod, right around the turn of the millennia, that the Jewish people would build the second temple that we think of in our minds today when we think of Jerusalem. Herod would build one of the largest edifices in the ancient world. In fact, the platform in which he constructed that the temple sat on would be the largest platform ever built by mankind till this day. The Western Wall, which I'm standing against right now, stretched 1,500 feet. That's like 500 meters. Another 1,000 feet wide. He literally had to shave off part of the mountain in order to construct this platform, which on top, of course, sat the Holy Temple with the Holy of Holies and the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, sitting in that room. Lined along the streets were shops, beautiful roadways, fountains, and of course, mikvaot, ritual baths that pilgrims who are coming to Jerusalem, especially on those 3 festive holidays, will be able to immerse themselves, purifying themselves spiritually in order to be in the right state of mind as they ascended the top of the Temple Mount, bringing with them their korbanot, their sacrifices here in Jerusalem. Unfortunately, the Second Temple would also come to an end, this time at the hands of the Romans, a despicable, morally depraved society. They came here to the house of prayer for all nations, a house of peace. They pushed down the stones. These are the stones that stood up on high here on the Western Wall. They came crashing down onto the road that I'm walking on right now. You can still see the force in which they smashed the roads, completely indenting this road here. They took the Jewish masons who built the Holy Temple. They took the gold from our reservoirs and they built the Colosseum, a house of death. What a shame. Although the desire to one day build the third temple, the final temple, the temple that will bring the final redemption to the Jewish people and all of humanity, still burns inside the Jewish people. Let's now head up to the Jewish quarter of the Old City to learn a little bit about the Roman period here in Jerusalem. After the destruction of the Second Temple, a new ruler would reshape Jerusalem, not in the image of David or Solomon, but rather of Rome itself. In the year 70 CE, the Roman general Titus will destroy Jerusalem, leave the city in ruins, scatter the people. But Rome wasn't finished. Decades later, Hadrian will try and reshape the image of Jerusalem, one that would reflect the power, ideals, and values of the pagan Roman world. He'll try and erase any Jewish connection to the land, and he'll do this by renaming Jerusalem and Israel. Jerusalem he calls Elio Capitolina, and the land of Israel he will rename Palestine, after a people who hadn't existed for 700 years, the Philistines, who have nothing to do with the Palestinians of today. The Jerusalem that he builds will have a cardo that is depicted in this mosaic that was constructed in the 6th century during the Byzantine period and laid on a floor of a church that was discovered in Ma'abada, Jordan. The cardo ran from Damascus Gate and crossed the entire city all the way to Zion Gate. The cardo was more than just a street. It was the backbone of any Roman city. It was lined with shops, public buildings, statues, and colonnades. Standing here, I can just imagine the shopkeepers calling out, the carts passing through, and the people walking underneath the shade of the colonnades. Hadrian tried to impose Roman civilization upon Jerusalem. But ironically, what he did is he preserved its ancient history beneath its stones. He tried to overwrite Jerusalem's soul with stone and law. But even the great mighty Roman Empire could not erase the memory of Zion. The cardo remains not as a symbol of Roman victory, but a layered city that will never be forgotten. The mural we can see here depicts the cardo at its heyday, but there's a really deep message here. There's something here that just doesn't fit the time period. That's right, this young boy here with his hat on backwards, a backpack, and of course, a plastic water of spring water. But there's a girl here, a Jewish girl from like the 6th century CE, handing him something very meaningful, a pomegranate, one of the 7 species that the Bible talks about. But the pomegranate in Jewish tradition, it says that there's 613 seeds in there, one for each of the commandments that God gave the Jewish people. So what this young girl is saying to this young boy is we might look different. We grew up in Jewish families 1,500 years apart from one another, but we're really the same, because what defines you as a person are the decisions you make. And what are your decisions based on? Pop culture, what we read on the news, or our tradition, our heritage, our mitzvot, God's commandments? And if it's the same as it is with me, then we truly are the same people we always have been for the last 3,800 years. After he builds the cardo, Hadrian will exile the Jewish people from Jerusalem. This exile will continue through the Christian Byzantine period. Many of the Jews will go north to the Galilee, to Tiberias and the Golan Heights. It's not until the year 638, nearly 5 centuries later, that the first Islamic rulers of Jerusalem, the Umayyads, will welcome a small community of Jews back in Jerusalem. However, when the European Crusaders come here, they will massacre the Jews that are still living here. They'll destroy the synagogues that were here. And for nearly 100 years, there's silence in Jerusalem of the Jewish people. However, in the 13th century, a great philosopher, a Jewish wise man by the name of Moshe ben Nachman, known by his acronym, the Ramban, will change everything. The Ramban fled Christian persecution in Spain, and he found his way here to Jerusalem. He wrote home in a letter where he stated, "What should I tell you of the land of Israel? The desolation is great. The greater the holiness, the more devastating the ruins." However, he didn't retreat. He took action. And he gathered up Jews that were living in hilltops surrounding Jerusalem. And he said, if not for Jerusalem, then for what? And he brought them back here to our holy city. And he built the synagogue that still stands to this day, known as the Ramban. here in the Jewish quarter, it is one of the oldest active synagogues. However, it's not gonna wow you with gold and grandeur, but the story of persistence is unbelievable. The synagogue stood as a testament that there could be a Jewish revival here in Jerusalem, even during a period of decline. In the centuries that followed the Ramban, the synagogue was damaged and even closed, but it was never lost in the memory of the Jewish people. In modern times, when the Jews once again returned here, they rebuilt that synagogue stone by stone. And today, its halls are filled with prayer and Torah study. It stands as a bridge between medieval faith and modern Jewish revival here in Jerusalem. Jerusalem continued its revival in the middle of the 19th century. With the advent of the steam-powered engine, Zionists, Jews wanting to return to the land of Zion, could do so on a steam-powered train. Suddenly, you had Jews from all over Europe returning to the land of Israel, and the population here in the Old City literally doubles in just a short few decades. Edmund Rothschild would build the building you can see behind me as a school for children who are living here. And as you can see, over 100 years later, it's still a school where children learn the laws of God. Unfortunately, that revival will come to an end in 1948 during the War of Independence, when the Jordanians would capture the Old City and ethnically cleanse it of its Jewish population. The last battle, the surrendering of the Old City to the Jordanians, would take place here in this square in front of that old building that was built by Edmund Rothschild.
I will bless those who bless you, God promised Abraham. Embrace this covenant by connecting with the people of Israel. From Jerusalem's stones to Galilee's shores, experience living faith through their traditions and hospitality. Your journey is more than visiting biblical sites. It's about hearts that welcome your friendship. Your presence matters. Discover Israel.
One of the many shuls that was destroyed by the Jordanians in the War of Independence was the Horva Synagogue, which means destroyed synagogue. Why was it called the destroyed synagogue? Well, in the beginning of the 18th century, in 1720, a group of Jews came here in order to revive the Jewish community. They borrowed money from Arab landowners. However, they weren't able to keep up, let's say, the mortgage payment. And so they threw them out of the synagogue, out of the community, and out of Jerusalem. It took 80 years for another group of Jews to come back, followers of the Vilna Gaon, who paid off that debt and built the synagogue known as the Horva. Not built exactly the way it was in 1720, but they still called it the destroyed synagogue to remember those that came here and tried to do what they couldn't. However, this shul was destroyed in 1948 because of its height. The tallest building in the Jewish quarter, it was used by snipers in the Jewish underground army. And so the Jordanians came with sappers and put devices all around it and blew it up in May of 1948. It wouldn't be until 2010 that it would be rebuilt and once again becoming a thriving part of the Jewish community here in the Old City. In 1967, when the paratroopers and the Israeli Defense Forces liberated the old city of Jerusalem, and the Jews who once lived here could return to their homes came with great excitement. But unfortunately for them, when they arrived here to the Jewish quarter, what they saw was that the Jordanians and the Arabs living here in the old city had destroyed almost in entirety the Jewish quarter. However, this isn't the first time that our communities have been destroyed. We got up, we brushed off our knees, and we began to rebuild. But we didn't rebuild the same way we built the 19th century. We built strong foundations and new apartment buildings where over 600 Jewish families live here today. This is the resilience of the Jewish people and the revival of their spirit here in Jerusalem. As people of the book, when we come to Israel, our focus and attention is always on Jerusalem. And when it's in Jerusalem, it's on the Jewish quarter. And when on the Jewish quarter, the reality is it's always on that wall right there. The Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, the last remaining wall of the Temple Mount complex that was built over 2,000 years ago. For thousands of years, people have been coming here, putting their hands on those stones and offering their prayers to God. I hope that when you come to Jerusalem the next time, you'll do the same thing and try and feel the energy of your ancestors reverberating back out at you from those stones that have soaked up millennia of prayers. Welcome to Land of the Bible. I'm David Sussman. Today, we're taking a journey through time, faith, and culture as we explore some of Jerusalem's most remarkable museums. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join us next time as we connect you to the people, places, and lands of the Bible.